According to locals, the gunmen took away their victims after raiding 3 villages in Zamfara state on Friday. Those abducted were said to be mostly women and children. The gunmen arrived at the villages in motorbikes and started shooting sporadically before kidnapping the villagers. Northern Nigeria is one of the hot spots for kidnappings in Nigeria, where gunmen attack villages, killing and kidnapping for ransom. At least 11 people were killed and 20 others abducted in the region in the last week of March alone. The government has been carrying out air and land operations in the region, but the attacks by the gunmen have continued. Analysts say the government needs to address root causes of kidnapping, which include high poverty and unemployment rates. There have also been calls for the government to use non-kinetic approach along with military firepower in addressing this security challenge. Nigeria's military has, however, assured that it is working to ensure that it curbs all forms of insecurity in 2024. Ajek Mangut, CGTN, Abuja.
Well, Nigeria has been plagued by a surge in kidnappings, leaving communities in fear and authorities struggling to contain the crisis. The wave of abductions highlights the dire nature of the insecurity gripping the country. CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy looks at the history of kidnappings in Nigeria.
In the early 2000s, the Niger Delta witnessed a surge in kidnappings targeting expatriate oil workers based on political and economic issues. Over the years, however, abductions have evolved into a lucrative enterprise for criminal networks operating in the region. In 2014, Boko Haram abducted over 250 schoolgirls in the Borno state town of Chibok. According to Amnesty International, more than 90 of the students are still missing. In 2018, 110 schoolgirls from the Yobe state town of Dabchi were abducted by a faction of Boko Haram. Another major abduction took place in 2020 in the Katsina state town of Kankara, where 300 schoolboys were kidnapped. In 2021, a night raid in Zamfara state led to the abduction of over 300 schoolgirls in Jangebe. And in early March of the same year, all abductees were released after the apparent payment of ransom. In March of 2024, gunmen kidnapped 287 students at a government secondary school in Kaduna State. Groups including bandits, Boko Haram and other extremist factions have been responsible for many of the kidnappings. The incidents have targeted a wide range of individuals, including children, students, government officials and foreign nationals. Despite efforts by the Nigerian government, the perpetrators continue to operate with impunity. Attempts to rescue kidnapped victims and dismantle criminal networks have been ongoing, but challenges persist in addressing the root causes of the problem. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, for some expert analysis on this, let's bring in David Otta-Endele, the director for the Geneva Center for Africa Security and Strategic Studies. Thank you so much for joining us, David. David, another abduction in Nigeria. For you, you've been watching this unfold for a really long time now. When you hear about the surge in kidnappings in Nigeria, what does it indicate for you, David?
I think it gives a confirmation that kidnapping for ransom in Nigeria is a national pandemic. We're not talking just about the Northeast, we're talking about, areas like the Northwest, even in the southern part of the country. You gave an intro talking about the kidnappings that used to occur in the Niger Delta region. This has moved from kidnapping foreigners to now a position where not just women and children are being kidnapped, but schools are being targeted. We talk about the historical 2014 Chibok girls that marked the beginning of mass kidnapping of students, by non-state actors. The Dabchi girls, the Jangabe boys, so it's been a numerous amount of kidnapping. I mean, some reports do indicate more than 5,000 kidnappings have occurred in Nigeria from 2023 to 2024. And that figure is still on the downside because a lot of these kidnappings go unreported. But the question that a lot of victims and Nigerians are asking is, when will this stop? When will the government be able to do something, despite the rhetorics that no ransom should be paid, and that kidnapping now carries a death sentence? But it does seem as a successful industry because the non-state actors keep doing it.
David, I wanted to ask you about the Nigerian government issuing that warning against ransom payments, and that's been going on for a while, even before this administration that's in power now. Yet locals and abduction victims' relatives reportedly continue to pay the ransoms that these kidnappers demand. How is this impacting the problem, David?
I think the government is caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. I mean, from a policy point of view, no government wants to have a scenario where it does give a green light signal for people to pay ransom. But at the same time, the government is put in a position where it doesn't have a preventive or a defensive strategy to counter kidnapping, so it cannot stop it. Therefore, it does issue statements of non-payment of ransom. I think simply because the government understands that where people do pay ransom, it does encourage other non-state actors. So, for example, we had scenarios in 2014 where Boko Haram, a jihadist group linked to Al-Qaeda, was the first to do this. And now, because they succeeded and because ransom has been paid in several occasions, other non-state actors, are now seeing it as a very lucrative area to get involved in. So, it's a very terrible and very challenging position, for the government, issuing this statement and saying no ransom should be paid. But the argument, I have to mention this, is that, for parents, relatives who have, their people being taken by these non-state actors, they do have very little choice to get them back without paying ransom. So it's not just the government caught in limbo here. Even the victims and the families, are caught in a position where either they do leave their relatives in the hands of these non-state actors, or defy the policy of the government that they shouldn't pay ransom to terrorist or non-state actors.
So David, looking at this issue, it seems to be really complex and also very deep-rooted. Going forward, David, what other actions do you think need to be taken to combat this?
I think it should go beyond issuance of policy statements in regards to non-payment of ransom. I think there has to be some kind of a comprehensive strategy. We've often said that kidnapping takes place locally, and the kind of kidnappings that we're experiencing in Nigeria now, the nature of the quantity, I call it, of people that are taken at a go, does demonstrate that there is a breakdown between the community engagement in terms of giving information to security agencies and the trust that exists, or perhaps one could also say that the fear that these people have for these non-state actors, who seem in some ways to have monopolized the use of violence to kidnap people. So there has to be a very comprehensive strategy. Crime takes place locally. The government needs to revive or review its national strategy when it comes to kidnapping. And of course, we talk about poverty and unemployment. But the truth is, not all poor people get involved in kidnapping, and not all unemployed people get involved in this. So it's difficult to pin a finger on poverty or unemployment. I think where the situation is that people are getting away with it. And because of that, more people are getting involved in kidnapping. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not a quick fix. It is a comprehensive strategy that the government required.